does our next guest have to say about old Tony Fauci? Host of The Next Revolution, Steve Hilton, is here. I'm just going to shut up and let you go because it's astonishing. It's astonishing what KJP had to say today. It's like he's just, you can't criticize Tony Fauci still.
I know, it's unbelievable still. I mean, and not just over this, but over all the mistakes that were made in the lockdown you've just been discussing. Look, the thing that I think people have to really understand to deeply get to the point here is that this language that a lot of people use about this story, which is that Fauci is accountable because he funded the Wuhan lab, that's technically true, but it doesn't even come close to capturing the depth of his connection there, because it wasn't just that he funded the lab, Fauci commissioned this work. And that's why you've still got the establishment trying to protect him, because what it really shows is that the guy who they all hold up as the hero of the pandemic turns out, in all likelihood, to have caused the pandemic. And anyone who wants to understand why that is, how could it possibly be that someone like Fauci, who, to be fair, has committed his life to medicine and public service, why would he possibly do something like that? Of course, he didn't do it deliberately, but actually, you go back to something he wrote in the Washington Post in 2011, over 10 years ago. These are the words of Fauci. They're kind of imprinted on my brain since I first reported on this story over 2 years ago. Fauci wrote that engineering a dangerous virus in the laboratory is a risk worth taking. He, Fauci, has long been, for over a decade, the leading global advocate for gain-of-function research. He was the main champion, running the biggest public health agency in the world, committed to trying to find vaccines, and in the name of that, the leading champion for gain-of-function research. That's why he pushed it through, even though after many examples of lab leaks of all different kinds around the world, huge numbers of scientists were saying we cannot go ahead with this gain-of-function research that had only just been invented because it's so risky. Fauci said, yeah, but it's a risk worth taking. So when there was another leak in 2013 here in America, the Obama administration put rules in place to stop it. They said, you've got to stop this stuff, right? No more new experiments, and even the ones that are going on, we have to come to an end. Fauci went around those rules that were imposed in 2014 to commission the series of experiments on bat coronaviruses that most likely led to this pandemic. Then again, in 2017, the Trump administration came in. The scientists, Fauci, all the rest of them, they wanted that Obama moratorium lifted. The Trump administration put in place new rules which said that if you've got any research like this that could lead to a pandemic, you've got to go to a separate review process run by the HHS, separate from the NIH and the NIAID. Yet again, Fauci went around those rules because he's so committed to this research. And that's why they'll do everything they can to protect him, because if it becomes known and accepted that the US government caused the global pandemic, albeit with the help of China that allowed the virus to escape its own lab and then covered it up, that is a monumental scandal which they aren't ready to cope with, in my view.
But Steve, I get that Anthony Fauci wants to cover his backside, but if this comes out that the government caused the pandemic, who would be to blame for that? It would be Donald Trump. And it seems like the media is always willing, Democrats are always willing to blame Donald Trump for things he does and things he doesn't do. So I don't get that more people weren't saying, hey, let's look at the truth. And it seems to me, as I look at it, people are afraid of China. They want peace with China at all costs, let alone saying, hey, you know what, China caused this. We can navigate the consequences of that, but let's actually call out where it came from.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, China deserves some blame and accountability, as I said, for the lab itself having insufficient biosafety, which meant that the virus could leak, and definitely for the cover-up, which both allowed the pandemic to spread and also stopped us from getting to the bottom of where it actually came from. Sure, let's hold China accountable for that, but the question is, what was going on in that lab? That lab was carrying out experiments that we commissioned.
Yes.
And when people say, well, it's Trump's fault or whatever, Trump did have rules in place. He put those rules in place. A lot of people have made this argument. I want to get into the detail again because you hear it all the time, that Obama banned this research and Trump lifted the ban. But it's more complicated than that. It's true that Trump lifted the blanket ban. He replaced it with a new process requiring a separate review for these kinds of projects. And in both cases, the Obama rules and the Trump rules, Fauci flouted them. This is what happens when you have an arrogant technocrat who believes he's above the rules, that he knows better than the politicians who are there to represent the people, that he should just go and do what he wants. He's been there for whatever it is, 30 years, lauded as this great servant of the people. So, you know, who are these politicians to stop me, Anthony Fauci, from doing what I want to do? It's that arrogance that led to this.
KJP today said that the attacks on Tony Fauci are political and counterproductive. Well, there are more than 1 million dead Americans who deserve some answers. The families and their surviving people who care about them, and they deserve answers. The whole country does. Steve Hilton, next revolution.
Exactly. And could I just make one more point, Tegan? It's not just looking back at that. It's looking forward. The debt that was caused, the trillions of dollars that we spent because of this unnecessary and avoidable pandemic, we'll be paying that off for decades.
No doubt. Steve, I love your show, Next Revolution, so smart. Always brilliant concepts that come up on your show that we don't always hear on the network throughout the week. Thank you for joining us.
He wants you to book him, is what it is.
Well, I was trying to say that, Steve. When I was a member of Congress, Steve booked me all the time. No longer,
Very
though.
happy
No longer.
to do it. Anytime.
Thank you, Steve.